doing today? Hope you're all well. So, there we go. Everything's set up and running except for one thing that I haven't pushed yet. There we go. Okay, now we are live everywhere. Good morning, whether you are on Zoom, whether you are on Bigo Live, or whether you're watching recording on YouTube. Hope you're all having an absolutely amazing day today. And today we are going to do what we usually do. Oh, if I don't throw everything on the floor when I'm getting the books. So, Rich Dad Poor Dad still have the Chinese version, but restrictions are easing, so I should be able to go and get the actual English version that I've always owned up until the time that I lent it to somebody and no longer had it. But in the meantime, we're going to be reading The Art of Thinking Clearly because it is so important to be able to think clearly. I think it was Albert Schweitzer, if anybody knows Albert Schweitzer, who said that the problem he thought with people in recent times is that they didn't think. And so that is a very interesting way of looking at it. So we're going to do some work on that. We're going to learn to think a little bit more clearly. We also need to take time to really think about what we want to achieve, what we want to do. And our minds are so much more powerful than we think. And also at the end, I might very quickly have a chat about the stock market and why the stock market went down last night. It didn't go down as badly as we thought, but there's been some very interesting news from China with regards to something that's been happening over there, which could play out in a very big way. So we might have a very quick chat about that at the end. But first of all, this will be the most important thing we need to do first. So yesterday we read chapter 20. Oh, hang on a minute. No, we already read chapter 28 yesterday. So yesterday we read, when you hear hoofbeats, don't expect the zebra, the base rate neglect. And today is day 29. So we're reading why the balancing force of the universe is baloney, the gambler's fallacy. Oh, and I also said that we might talk about the difference between gambling and investing. So that ties in very well with what's been happening in China. Okay, here we go. In the summer of 1913, something incredible happened in Monte Carlo. Crowds gathered around a roulette table and could not believe their eyes. The ball had landed on black 20 times in a row. Many players took advantage of the opportunity and immediately put their money on red. But the ball continued to come to rest on black. Even more people flocked to the table to bet on red. It had to change eventually, but it was black yet again. And again and again. It was not until the 27th spin that the ball eventually landed on red. By that time, the players had bet millions on the table. In a few spins of the wheel, they were bankrupt. Now, this is why modern casino games have table limits, so that you cannot keep. So, for example, there's a strategy they talk about which is called doubling. And so if you double on a roulette table, then you are going to, be able to keep winning. But in this case, they have a table limit, which means that if you keep doubling, eventually you hit the table limit and you cannot keep doubling, which means that you cannot eventually make your money back, no matter how many times the roulette wheel keeps going against you. So very quick example, let's say that I put $10 on and I lose, and then I put $20 on and I lose, and then I put $40 on and I lose. If when I put the $40, and I then put $80, if I then win, I'm still $10 ahead based on the 2 times 8. The 2 times 80 is more than the 10 plus the 20 plus the 40 that I've already put on. So it works out very, very interestingly. Okay, now I might have to put the Bigo Live on sideways because I've just noticed that my battery is dying, which doesn't happen very often. And this way, there we go. So we will continue, but we'll just have to continue this way. We'll just, there we go. Put that a little bit more crooked. There we go. That was a bit of a slight deviation to what we were expecting, but that's okay. The battery is charging again. Okay, so the average IQ of pupils in a big city is 100. To investigate this, you take a random sample of 50 students. The first child tested has an IQ of 150. What will the average IQ of your 50 students be? Most people guess 100. Somehow they think that the super smart student will be balanced out, perhaps by a dismissal student with an IQ of 50, or by 2 below average students with IQs of 75. But with such a small sample, that is unlikely. We must expect that the remaining 49 students will represent the average of the population, so they'll each have an average IQ of 100. Even that's a little bit problematic because averages don't average out. I remember at university having fun with taking averages and then taking the average of the average and the average of those averages, and it just becomes a mess and it doesn't really mean anything. 49 times 100 plus IQ of 150 gives us an average of 101 in the sample. The Monte Carlo example and the IQ experiment show that people believe in the balancing force of the universe. This is the gambler's fallacy. However, with independent events, there is no harmonizing force at work. A ball cannot remember how many times it has landed on black. Despite this, one of my friends enters the weekly Mega Millions number into a spreadsheet and then plays those that have appeared the least. All this work is for naught. He is another victim of the gambler's fallacy. We could go very, very deeply into this one. So, yeah, obviously, whenever you roll a dice or whenever you do something, it is going to come out randomly. So there's an interesting thought that, yes, there is going to be a pattern with regards to when a black or when a red or when a 6 or a 1 or a 2 will come up. But literally, it is just completely random every single time. And the universe isn't saying, oh, well, I've done red a couple too many times. It's time for a black. The world just doesn't really work that way. But then we come into electronic gambling and the fact that there are actually computer programs that might be running on some kind of system. And that brings us to a completely different thing. Okay, the following joke illustrates this phenomenon. A mathematician is afraid of flying due to the small risk of a terrorist attack. So in every flight, he takes a bomb with him in his hand luggage. The probability of having a bomb on the plane is very low, he reasons. And the probability of having 2 bombs on the plane is virtually 0. A coin is flipped 3 times and lands on heads on each occasion. Suppose someone forces you to spend thousands of dollars of your money betting on the next toss. Would you bet on heads or tails? If you think like most people, you will choose tails, although heads is just as likely. The gambler's fallacy leads us to believe that something must change. And that's interesting because some people have the system of following the trend and some people have the system of going against the trend. It's really interesting. A coin is tossed 50 times and each time it lands on heads, again with someone forcing you to bet. Do you pick heads or tails? Now that you've seen an example or two, you're wise to the game. You know that it could go either way, but you've just come across another pitfall. The classic déformation professionnelle, professional oversight of mathematicians. Common sense would tell you that heads is the wiser choice, since the coin is obviously loaded. So that's the other thing. In certain games, people are going to be cheating, and so there could be a bias in the coin, or there could be something that they've done to stack the odds in their favor. Previously, in another chapter, we looked at regression to mean. An example, if you're experiencing record cold where you live, it is likely that the temperature will return to normal values over the next few days. If the weather functioned like a casino, there would be a 50% chance that the temperature would rise and a 50% chance that it would drop. Only the casino isn't 50-50. But the weather is not like a casino. Complex feedback mechanisms in the atmosphere ensure that extremes balance themselves out. In other cases, however, extremes intensify. For example, the rich tend to get richer. A stock that shoots up creates its own demand to a certain extent, simply because it stands out so much. A sort of reverse compensation effect. So it is really important, and I would highly recommend a book called Innumeracy that talks about all of these mathematical and statistical things and how we know so little about it and how it tricks us in everyday life, including very, very smart people. And so I think that the biggest lesson from today is that you need to take a step back and know what you can control and what you can't control. And if you can't control it, then probably stay away from it unless you're just having fun. And if you can control it, then you can do your research and you could still end up being wrong. But now you have some element of the ability to be able to participate with having some control. So take a closer look at the independent and interdependent events around you. Purely independent events rely on only Purely independent events really only exist at the casino, in the lottery, and in theory. In real life, in the financial markets and in business, with the weather and your health, events are often interrelated. What has already happened has an influence on what will happen. As comforting an idea as it is, there is simply no balancing force out there for independent events. What goes around comes around simply does not exist. Okay, so that is a very interesting chapter, and I think it ties in well with what I wanted to have a chat about. So the difference between gambling and investing is that with gambling, everything is just pure chance. You have no control over what is happening. Somebody else is rolling the dice. Somebody else is spinning the roulette wheel. Somebody else is spinning the ball around the roulette wheel. Somebody else is dealing the cards and shuffling the cards. And so everything is completely random. Whereas in the stock market, on the real estate market, there you do actually have access to information. So you have access to, for example, who is running the company and what their track record is. You have information with regards to how many sales the company has made. You have information with regards to the value that the company holds. So, for example, how much are the tables and chairs and buildings and everything that the company owns? How much is that worth? And if you divide that by the number of stocks that the company has, then you can start to see, for example, and I'm just wondering whether the Bigo is actually on its side or not, whether people can see me properly, but that doesn't matter. Regardless, the information is important, not what I look like on the camera. And so you have all of this information, and this information allows you to be able to make choices based off of that, so that you have a small amount of control. So you still don't have full control, otherwise there wouldn't be people who were very successful or billionaires or even connected people that would lose money, and they still do end up losing some money. But it is a lot safer than, for example, just going to the casino, where you can have a lot of fun, but where you do not really have a lot of control. There are a few systems, but mostly casinos know about those systems, and they will put in measures to stop you from being able to have those systems. So, for example, table limits on roulette prevent you from being able to use the system of doubling the amount of money that you bet, notwithstanding the fact that you probably don't have enough money to be able to keep doubling 27 times anyhow. But the idea is that the casino already knows about some of these things and will prevent you. And the same also happens in investment circles. So if you used to have strategies that you could use, for example, being able to have insider information, that's been outlawed. Having information before anybody else has been outlawed. So a lot of these things are also being held from you, so that it becomes a little bit more of an even playing field for everybody. But you do have access to certain information as long as you have that information at the same time as everybody else. So very quickly as well, what has been happening in China? Why has the market been going down? So there is a company in China called Evergrande, and they are the second largest real estate company in China. They have assets. I think it's about $14 billion worth of assets that they control, 280 cities in China, lots and lots of real estate. But they also have food and beverage manufacturing, and they have a couple of other things that they do nowadays because they've become extremely large. And China has announced that they are unable to make their interest payments. And some people are speculating that this will send the company bankrupt, and that it could, because it is such a large company and because it deals with such a large industry, and China is full of people that are super interested in, and there's some very interesting articles around China and why they love real estate and how it is one of the only investments that people in China love to participate in. And the market is actually set up for it to keep growing no matter what. They don't have a lot of bubbles in China because everybody invests in real estate, and they know that their economy will collapse if real estate collapses. So they keep propping it up. But now with Evergrande not being able to make its interest repayments, the bubble might finally start to burst over in China, even though they've been propping it up for forever. So it's very interesting what will happen. And some speculate that China could go into recession if Evergrande fails. So it will be interesting to see whether Evergrande is allowed to be able to continue, whether the government props it up somehow, or whether the government allows the bubble to prick, and whether they allow Evergrande to fail and what will happen if that occurs. So keep your eyes on China. There are some very interesting things that will make a lot of sense over the coming months. If you follow that and start to understand what is going on. Obviously, everything is interconnected, but in very confusing ways. So the history of how everything has happened. I mean, the Second World War was very easy to understand that it was coming looking back. If you were living at the time, it was difficult. What is happening right now, it's difficult to predict what will happen, but in 20 years' time, people look back at us and say, oh, it is so obvious that this and this and this would have happened. So that's a little bit of extra commentary for today. So that was why the balancing force of the universe is baloney. So you have to realize that things don't average out or go back to how we expect them to. Sometimes there are anomalies where something that should go back to a normal price, or when red has been going on for too long, it should go back to black. That doesn't necessarily happen because there are anomalies in the world. And I think there's a record for how many times somebody has flipped the heads, and it is very, very large, but they spent the whole day just flipping. And yeah, they waited to see which was the largest street that they could get during that 24-hour period. And it was quite a large record. So keep that in mind. And then tomorrow, we are on chapter 30, Why the Wheel of Fortune Makes Our Head Spin. And this one is called The Anchor. So that is not very clear. So you'll have to come and join us tomorrow to get access to chapter 30. I'm looking forward to reading that to you. Have an amazing day. Leave comments. Let me know what you thought, anything that you are interested in with regards to what we've been talking about, a direction that you want us to take this in, other books that you'd like us to read. I'm always enjoying the comments and everything else that everybody is sharing. So it is amazing having you here today. And I'm looking forward to reading another chapter and sharing more ideas about the economy and what's going on. Yeah. See you all tomorrow. Have a great day. And keep your eyes on China. Some interesting things developing over there.